Welcome back. This is the UiPath Forward 4 Journey Theater. Seeing some new faces, and thanks for sticking around. This is going to be a really headlining presentation. I'm excited to welcome Amazon to the stage here in just a second for their masterclass in enterprise-wide automation. What are they doing differently? It is targeting automation to their critical business priorities and challenges. So my challenge to all of you in the audience, whether you're taking notes on paper, taking notes on your phone, is document those 3 major business challenges at your organization. Try to throw a number to it. You're going to see exactly what Amazon is doing with automation, and it is an incredible story across treasury, payments to their 1 million employees, as well as HR. How did they hire 1 million people over the last year? Automation was a huge part of it. Really glad to welcome to the stage Jonathan Finch, the treasury lead at Amazon, and he's kicking us off. Thanks, folks.
Nice to meet everyone. I'm Jonathan Finch, Assistant Treasurer at Amazon. I'm a Chief Technology Officer for Amazon's Treasury and Risk Management teams. Get into that in a little bit. We've got a great lineup here. I'll introduce the team, talk about the drivers for a low-code automation strategy. So when we think about low-code, Amazon historically has been build. A lot of software development, some white space for low-code automation. Give you a sense of footprint, where UiPath is across the enterprise at Amazon. And then we've got 2 teams that are going to deep dive into use cases. So my team, Treasury Technology, Scott Slusser, who's our Senior Product Manager, will talk about our workers' compensation use case. We've got our people experience. So like Ben said, we have hired 1 million people over the last year with COVID. Pretty interesting journey, to be honest, to be on that. It used to be peak was December, right? Where the fulfillment centers were at capacity. Last year, every single month was at capacity because everyone's ordering online. So, and then we'll get into citizen development and talk about what our mental model is with that. So here I am, Jonathan Finch, Assistant Treasurer. Scott Slusser is going to come up in a little bit, Senior Product Manager. Sean Chambers, who leads our people and experience. So think about like the tech that touches 1 million plus employees, a really large scope. And then Sumit is going to come talk about citizen development. A little bit about my team and what we're doing. So when people think about treasury, they kind of think of what's on the left-hand side of the box here around customers. So you think about cash and liquidity management. We've got $80 billion on our balance sheet. We've got hundreds of legal entities. We've got thousands of bank accounts. We have very complex cash pooling structures all over. And so all the systems and technology that power that is what my team focuses on. In addition to trading and investments, you think about all these legal entities and things like interco, and you've got to trade foreign currency. And so we're in the tens of billions of FX that we're trading. And so the way my team is structured is we've got sort of verticals that are aligned with the customers, where we've got a treasury vertical and then we've got a risk vertical. What's interesting is, about 50% of treasury organizations also manage insurance. So we have our own insurance company, we self-insure. We have about 30 some odd insurance programs. So some examples would be classic, like, you've got a bunch of fulfillment centers and you have an injured associate, so you've got a workers' compensation claim. But we do everything from property to, casualty to, think about a handful of years ago, there were no Amazon vehicles on the road. Now we have 500,000-600,000. So everything from a rock chip to, a more serious accident results in a claim. So claims processing, claims administration, and even some complicated stuff like underwriting systems for our self-insurance. So our team manages that. And then underneath, this is where RPA comes into play. So core services is led by Scott Slusser. That is all of our software development. That is all of our RPA. That's AWS services. That's a lot of BI engineering. So think about like Tableau and presentation layer around mountains and mountains of data sitting on an AWS data lake. So that's a little bit of just context around my team. And I think what's interesting is, a lot of the themes I've heard in some of the earlier conferences or earlier presentations is about how quickly can I establish ROI. The presentation we just had was all about ROI. I think this slide actually kind of leads to some ROI. So historically, Amazon Treasury and Risk and all that I told you about was sort of managed by business process owners who were well-intentioned, making third-party buy decisions with a lack or an absence of a coordinated strategy. And so we knew that that was not sustainable. We knew that we could not continue to throw operational headcount at these, at these problems. And I've got some numbers on a subsequent slide that I'm happy to share with you. But the team was essentially a team of one, and that was me. And that was about 2 years ago. And we said, we need to automate and digitize all of Amazon's treasury, all of Amazon's risk, and all of Amazon's insurance. How do we do that? Multiple levers. So you can see, we actually had PwC, a Big Four, come in and help us with a technology roadmap. That actually sort of laid the foundation. But RPA was one of the earliest programs that we did. We did it for a number of reasons that we'll get into here in a little bit. But what I like about this slide is it gives you kind of a flavor of third-party applications. So FIS is our treasury workstation that we're about to implement. It is the largest treasury workstation. So if you think about all the bank connectivity to hundreds of banks, thousands of bank accounts, daily cash positioning, and the movement of cash in and out of Amazon. It's a pretty significant buy decision we made, all hosted on AWS. Treasury request system is internally developed. My team internally built this software to manage the intake of somewhere between, on the order of magnitude, $50 to $60 billion of FX trade. And so I look at RPA, and more specifically UiPath, is a key lever because, and we'll get into it actually on this next slide, is why do we need a low code automation strategy? The first one is around hypergrowth. I think there's no denying that Amazon has been growing at hyperscale. It's at a point where it's almost dizzying to work there. But 50% growth in claims year over year. I don't know if that's normal within the industry. I don't have an insurance background, but those numbers are pretty staggering. And the old way of managing this is no longer sustainable. So we think about the growth in not just claims, but bank accounts, MGM acquisition, Whole Foods acquisition. The treasury landscape is growing not just in terms of volume, but also in terms of complexity. Digital upskilling, without question, one of our biggest themes at Amazon is how do we upskill our employees? Very public, hundreds of millions we're throwing at this, typically more oriented towards software development. This is actually an extension of that. And so on a subsequent slide, we'll talk about kind of the demand that I am seeing within my ecosystem of people raising their hands saying, I'd love to be an RPA developer. So employee satisfaction. Every day, if you're an Amazon employee, when you log on, you get a question. Am I happy with my job? Am I happy with my manager? It's a Richter scale of 1 to 5. And there's a lot of data that we can extract from that to improve the experience of our employees. And so Sean's going to talk about this from a people tech perspective, but we do strive to be Earth's best employer. That was a new leadership principle we added recently. Longer lead times. I think this one is a common theme, right? So we have software development teams. I have a software development team. The issue is that software developers are very expensive, hard to recruit, hard to retain, especially in back office finance function, right? If you think about you want to be a software developer and you want to come to Amazon, you're thinking Alexa, you're thinking some of these other, more interesting products. Not that treasury workstations I find them very interesting, but the bottom line here is that I've seen so many disappointed people because they can't get their problem onto a tech roadmap. And more times than not, a lot of these use cases that they have are like not really material on to a tech team, but to them, they're very material. They're 3 hours, they're 4 hours of their time that they would rather spend analyzing. I saw a data point the other day that finance analysts spend 50% of their time looking up data versus analyzing data, and that needs to change. We can't do that anymore. People don't graduate from good universities, come to Amazon to spend 50% of their time looking up data. It's just not what we need to do, and that's not who we want to be. I'm going to park the COVID-19 one because Sean's going to come up here in a minute and talk about a really interesting use case for how we've solved we've used RPA to help automate the onboarding of 1 million plus employees. I'm not going to go into all of these, but 20 plus countries, a lot of that is a specific payroll use case, 200 bots across our enterprise right now. These are directional numbers. These are not specific numbers, about 300,000 hours we've saved across the enterprise. My team has a CFO goal of 60,000 hours. So within 2.5 years, we've gone from no tech team in treasury technology, and all the numbers, the 9 boxes are my team here. We've gone from no technology really to about a 60,000 hour goal. Here's the numbers from a citizen developer perspective. So 43, well, what does 43 mean? If it were 42, it'd be the meaning of life, and Jackie Robinson, 43, I don't know. 43 of about about a population of treasury and risk of about 420. So about 10%. And I'd say that this number would be 2x what it is if we did not have COVID. With COVID, we actually saw our citizen development, specifically around training. There was an adjustment period. I think everyone in this room recognizes the fact that we were so used to having on-site trainings, but I can tell you the demand is very, very strong. Even 10% is a really good number. If you think about Amazon Finance all up, we're 10,000-ish employees. It's a massive organization. And if you can get 10% of that, just think about the efficiencies that you can gain. So in terms of what my team has done, we've got 36,000 hours in the pipeline, about 30,000. So about half of the CFO goal that I have personally, 60,000 hours, is coming from RPA, which is pretty impressive. If you think about all the investments that you saw on the previous slide around, homegrown software for, internal trading for FX to third-party systems that are going to have a whole host of efficiencies. So with that, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for being here. I'd like to call up my colleague, Scott Slusser, who's going to deep dive into one of the more interesting use cases we have. So Scott, welcome. There you go.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the wonderful handoff. Before we kind of jump into it, I want to, be really specific to say I'm really happy to be here for multiple reasons. First, it got me out of the house. Second, it allowed me to dust off some clothes I haven't worn in almost 2 years. And third, I get a haircut, which my wife is super, super excited about. Haven't done that in a while. So thanks again for this. Super excited to talk about RPA and how Amazon is utilizing it within our organization. And before we actually jump into the slides as well, too, I want to say, if I had an RPA bot back in the day when I was performing manual processes early in my career, it would have been super, super impactful. I'm sure Jonathan would probably agree with that as well too, except I don't think they had computers when he first started his career, so I'm not so sure how that would actually work. All jokes aside, we'll kind of jump into the actual slides now. So Jonathan went through the treasury technology background a little bit, so I won't harp on that too much. But been around for 2 years. Treasurer's goal was to automate and reduce, those non-value added tasks that we have across the organization. Treasury, it's that cash movement, it's those FX trades. Risk, it's that risk and insurance. But what we're finding is that there's a lot of workers' compensation claims processes that are super manual. And it's mostly because we grew so quickly. We have 1 million employees. Sean's going to talk about that from a different perspective of the hiring. But that also could potentially lead to workers' compensation claims that are not necessarily a good thing, but something we do need to make sure we are working towards. And Jonathan also mentioned this as well too, right? We don't only use RPA, we use traditional software development, we use Tableau and QuickSight for business analytics, and we kind of combine those all together to make sure that we are working and improving our customers' lives one day at a time. So what is the actual process I want to talk about today? It's called the claim wage process. Sounds relatively straightforward, right? Someone gets injured, we need to confirm how much money they make so we can continue to pay them once they're on their workers' compensation claim. It's a little bit more complex than that once you start to really think about supporting thousands of employees with completely manual processes that we don't have scaled and they don't really work properly, right? So they're super time consuming for our workers' compensation managers. They're prone to human errors because they're doing a lot of manual manipulation. Our workers' compensation managers kind of act as that intermediary, right? HR has that wage information. They want to give that wage information to our claim adjusters, and they need to be the people to put that glue together. And again, we're going to continue hiring. Our volumes are going to continue to increase as well too. 32% year over year this year, probably more next year. And all of this because it's not done systematically, it's all done manually. There's a lot of tracking, a lot of follow-up that our users need to be doing, and that can also lead to potential errors and potential missteps as well too. So what does this process look like before we automate it with the bot? This is it up here. So there's a lot of looking at emails, logging into our trouble ticket systems, looking at these wage files, reviewing these wage files, reaching out to HR to say, hey, this is wrong, can you please correct that? And then again, going and manually updating that into the workers' compensation claim tool, our third-party tool, Origami, and then also manually encrypting it, and then also sending that to our claims adjusters. Tons and tons of manual processes, tons of places for that to go wrong. So what we did is we used a bot. We automated all of those things. Now the only thing that we really have left is that error exception section where it's a human in the loop. It's running and they know they need to go and actually go fix something to get it done. So at the end of the day, this is an awesome solution that we did, but it's also a unique solution as well too, right? So this solution actually came from the business. The business brought this solution to us because they had just learned about RPA in a separate situation. And they actually brought it up to us and said, hey, I would like to use this solution for one state and my specific process. When we brought that to our COE, we started looking at it and we said, actually, this could be expanded much farther than that. So what we did is we piloted it with 5 states. We gave an attended bot to all workers' comp managers for those 5 states. We began standardizing that process for them so that when we decided to onboard additional states as well too, then it would be much easier down the road. We also made sure that the rules that we were building out were highly configurable to be able to make sure that it scaled accordingly as well too. And then from that, the impact was relatively large, right? It's only been live for 2 months, but we're expecting to save at least 3,000 hours on this specific process already. And it's already doing 500 wages per month. In addition to that, it's increasing accuracy. Before this was all being done on somebody's computer directly. Now it's actually being done by the bot, saving that information into one central location for traceability, for audit purposes, and for people to be able to retrieve that later on. And at the end of the day, that kind of decreases that processing time as well as increases efficiency because now you have that human in the loop. The worker comes in, they run that attended bot, it runs picture-in-picture mode in the background, and it completes on its own. The only time they actually have to integrate or work with that bot is whenever there's an error. This is just one of those very simple solutions that it was brought to our attention. We executed on it very quickly with our partners, and we were able to bring it to production relatively quickly. We have a lot more of these specific use cases coming up. But now I'll hand it over to Sean, who is actually going to talk about a really, really impactful solution from the People Experience Technology team. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So I was telling my wife, I'm gonna be in Vegas. They're gonna put me on a stage. They're gonna give me a microphone. And I was like, if I don't either sing a song or tell a joke, I feel like I'm missing a big opportunity. But I can't sing. And Scott already told the joke, so you're stuck with my slides, unfortunately. But thanks a lot, Scott. All right, so I'm Sean Chambers. I lead a People Experience and Technology team at Amazon, which is essentially a team that is, we have a simple remit, but not such a simple remit in that we're really there to drive automation and improve the technology across all the HR processes. So think about the employee life cycle from recruiting all the way through termination and all of the various stacks of products. We're there to drive the automation. Jonathan and Scott alluded to the business problem of how do you scale to 1 million employees, and that's really the big challenge for us is how do we build things to scale, and RPA and UiPath have really saved the day in a lot of respects for us in sort of going trying to drive that mission. So just to kind of restate the problem, huge company, 1 million employee base. The company moves fast, as you might be aware, and the challenge is how do we keep pace with the business? And I think as many of you can appreciate, your traditional product teams are going to struggle to keep pace with that amount of growth, right? So products typically heavy dev cycles, right? And so they're usually just crushed under the strain of that growth. So that's where RPA is really helped. Is we've been able to quickly deploy RPA solutions across just about every use case, and it's really given the product teams across HR tech some breathing space to catch up a little bit. So it's really been an effective solution in that way. So the topic before this one was ROI. So clearly the ROI you'll see on the last slide is there for us. So we're saving thousands of hours, 200,000 hours you'll see. So the savings in cost is just been phenomenal. But what we're looking at now with Amazon and the scale, and trying to, create a consistent associate experience for all those million employees, is what I love about RPA is it also introduces system control. So it reduces defects, it improves quality. So the use case that I'll talk a little bit about is a recruiting use case. But we actually, I think 60%, and I've got a couple of my team members here so they can nod, but I think 60% of our use cases are in arguably one of the most complex, important areas in HR, and that's time and pay. So it speaks to the fact that, deploying RPA, it comes with all of the system controls and process controls. So I think defect reduction is something we're really excited about going forward. So the use case. So this was, I'm not sure who here remembers, but there was a pandemic last year. There's my joke. Sorry, it's a bad joke. And it drove our operations into like hyperdrive. So, the customers, the demand for wanting goods delivered straight to your door and not having to go out, that demand significantly increased. So it just sort of drove operations kind of to unprecedented levels, like beyond our peak Christmas levels, and therefore we needed to add capacity. And so we needed to hire a lot of employees. And so one specific use case where this kind of shows the value of RPA in a big scale was for these hourly employees that go through the recruiting process and get an offer, so they get an offer extended to them. They go through a drug testing process. And before RPA, we had essentially kind of recruiting assistants have to manually move people kind of through that drug testing status, right? So they'd go through the drug screen. If they passed, they'd have to flip their status. Well, that's okay unless you've got like millions of candidates and you're trying to hire almost 500,000 people in a matter of months. Like it would just be too slow. It'd be a bad candidate experience. Our fulfillment centers wouldn't get the capacity they needed because people kind of stuck in the process. So we were able to deploy this bots on this process in a matter of weeks, and just automated that drug screen process, and it just completely took the friction out of the process, and ultimately allowed our sites to receive those applicants and those employees. So this is like my favorite slide. So this is talk about ROI. So we started this journey with UiPath about a year and a half ago. You'll see the numbers from 2020. So about 80,000 hours saved. You'll see this year, we're, I think, 125,000, maybe more than that now. So we've saved more than 200,000 hours just in the HR space, and it's still the tip of the iceberg for us. So we still have plans to go even bigger. But yeah, I just wanted to thank UiPath to help, kind of helping us along on this journey, and we look forward to going bigger in 2022. Let me turn it over to Jonathan.
We're about out of time here, so I'm going to just quickly glance to a flywheel. Some of you who know Amazon and know what Jeff Bezos, he came up with the original flywheel. We actually came up with one for citizen development. I'll let you kind of just consume this while we wrap up. I just want to say a few things about citizen development. I think number one, it aligns with our digital upskilling at Amazon. Number two, job satisfaction. Number three, pretty significant demand that we're seeing, at least within the finance function, which is exciting. So I've been told to wrap this up. I just want to say thank you for your time. It's really good to be here. Amazon normally doesn't do PowerPoints, so we are a writing culture. Typically, we write docs. So it was actually kind of fun to put some PowerPoint together for the first time. But if any of you have any questions, want to do Q&A, we're all going to be in the back of this room, or maybe just right outside. So come grab any of us. I want to say thank you to my panel, Scott, Sumit, and Sean, and Ben. Any final words?
Just a huge thank you. Really incredible story that you just shared there. Massive returns. Great work, Jonathan. And thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in here on the Journey Theater. That is the Amazon masterclass story of enterprise-wide automation. Hopefully you were taking notes, and I wanted to get you thinking about your massive business opportunities or challenges at your organizations. This is exactly what Amazon did here, is how do we hire 1 million people? How do we pay 1 million people? I want you thinking about those big challenges. Automation can play a part. Your leaders are going to love it. We are back here in the Journey Theater in 1 hour. It's going to be an honest discussion about missteps on their automation journey. Hey, you can realize massive value, but there are challenges along the way. We're back here in 1 hour. Enjoy your lunches. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.